Hey, hello everyone. Thanks for getting up so early. So today I will talk something rather out of distribution for me about jobs and AGI. I mean, the AGI is in distribution, but the jobs are sort of out of distribution. And one motivation to do this work is that I'm very annoyed by the public and also the professional discussion about this topic. I mean, the public discussion I can, happily ignore, but the professional discussion, I mean, it should be more professional. And I mean, most economists believe, right, this is another industrial revolution, and yes, some jobs will disappear, but don't worry, new jobs will come, right? And we have seen this before. But this time, that's at least my and the minority's claim is that this time is really different. But we can get it right, and it can be a utopia. We all have at least the same goods and services as before, but we don't have to work anymore, and probably even more goods and services. Okay, so that's what this talk is about. And you will understand this quote sort of at the end of the talk. Horses did not get new jobs when tractors arrived; they got retired. Okay, that's pretty clear. And then I forgot the name of the economist. Well, if humans are not horses, they are apes. There's a counter argument to that we are those. And yeah, both sides are partially right, but ultimately misleading. And this talk argues for a fourth position, and the post-labor prosperity. So first, AGI is inevitable. I mean, of course, we could globally agree to halt it, but the economic benefits are so great. So it is most likely to come. I mean, AGI is probably already here in a certain sense, and it's not in a couple of years. And advanced robotics will also come, progress has been faster in recent years than I expected. And then eventually to perform all cognitive and then all physical tasks better and cheaper than humans. And the good news is that, well, if we replace human workers by AI, the economy doesn't shrink. I mean, there's some ways to make it shrink, but there's also ways not to make it shrink, right? If you don't give people money and they can't buy stuff anymore, it will not be produced anymore, the economy shrinks, right? So, but that's not a path which I recommend. So the true challenge is not production, the true challenge is distribution. And I will show you that in theory, the money is there. In practice, of course, things are more complicated, and it's the reason why this little side project grew and grew and grew and grew to get everything right. And the basic solution is, I mean, ultimately UBI, universal basic income, but with a transition phase. So some machine tax and unemployment money, which then morphs into UBI in the long run. So I will talk about AGI and labor in the four camps, then the economics of automation, the illusion of full employment, redistribution and UBI, and society, democracy, and meaning, and then some conclusion. Okay, so here's the quadrant. This is what it started. So you can believe in full employment, or you can believe in mass job loss. I mean, you can believe something in between too, but these are the extremes. And you can believe in prosperity, or you can believe in stagnation or decline or dystopia. And so in these boxes, there are various people. So the full employment and prosperity, that's the economists. New jobs will always be created. Don't worry. Most real people are very worried about losing their job and going into poverty. And then there are the others are AI deniers, which sort of, AGI is far off, it will never come, it cannot replace me. I mean, this box is slowly dying out here. And then there seems to be a minority, and I hope, this box grows. I think probably mostly among philosophers or philosophically oriented people, that output persists, and we just need to redistribute it properly. Okay. Yeah, I mentioned that already, so I can skip the slide. And so here is a slide with the industrial revolutions in the past, right here, the mechanical, then the electrical, then the digital revolution, and the next one is AGI, which is really around the corner or here. And then at some point, the robots can take over also the physical work. that will take a little bit longer, especially the dexterity of a human hand is really, really very hard to yeah, and the speed will also be much faster. Okay, so here is the labor. Yes, labor over time. So there's some personal care, eating, drinking, and grooming, and so on, which you can't outsource, right? I mean, you have to do it yourself. This will probably stay. That's hours per week. Then, a long time ago, we had, a lot of people working in agriculture. I mean, it was 70% from the working hours. Now 3% are working, yeah, but we still have all jobs, right? So that's the economics argument, and this revolution will be the same. Industry, sort of the heavy industry, also go down over time, and the services go up. Service sector is growing, relatively growing. And then there also goes household chores, but we also have some automation at home. And you see this little bump here. So this bump are the Americans, yeah. So in Europe, we managed to just go down further and further, and we have sort of on average, I think, 35 hours per week. But the Americans like to work. But the Europeans like to enjoy their life. So yeah, there's interesting discussion. So I was in a debate, there were 12 people, and there was a poll then who believes that we need jobs in the future, and only 2 hands went up, and that was the 2 Americans, and the Europeans didn't move their hand up. So we have, the productivity grew and the real wages also grew until the 1970s, and then something went wrong. So then the capital owners got all the profits, and we have a diverge. So the income per person didn't grow much anymore, inflation corrected. But for the rich people, it grew up a lot. And I mean, if you don't actively do something about it, this will, go even further apart. So here is the investment in AI in the last 13 years, and you see it's growing up like hell. I mean, sometimes you're doubling every year. That's a little bit exaggerating because in 2021 it was already pretty high, then it was a trough. So this year it will be $500 billion, and it's just growing. So it's a real huge business. Okay, so there are also a lot of studies, estimates how many jobs will be lost. Most of them are old, right? Here to newer ones. And so even the old ones in 2013 estimate 47% of the US jobs are high risk. I mean, it's very qualitative, this stuff. And I mean, we don't have to go through these numbers, but the point is, this is more than just 5%, right? You can absorb 5% unemployment, but these are large numbers. Okay, yeah, that's a similar graph. Let's skip this. So here are some predictions. That is, Katja Grace, he's well known in AI safety, and she runs, I think, every second year or so, a huge poll among, I think it's mostly AI researchers, what they believe, how long it takes for automation. I think, some things are a little bit optimistic, and some are way too pessimistic, right? Best-selling novel. I mean, I think, this year is ready already. Could happen this year, right? These systems are really, really good. Maybe next year, but I'm not I'm not underestimating that, but that seems a little bit excessive. Okay. Anyway, there are lots of things, right? I mean, folding the laundry. I mean, I'm a little bit less optimistic. I mean, the dexterity of these robots are. I mean, I have seen videos, but it's really no comparison, even to me. Yeah. Not really good. Yeah, I don't want to repeat myself, but the key insight is as long as the goods and services are produced, mass underemployment is perfectly consistent with material prosperity. And nobody needs to be worse off if we distribute it properly. But is there enough money to distribute? So that's the question. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I have some better slide later. Yes, the production cost, if everything is automated, will go to 0. I think I have a better slide later. And so why machines are superior to humans? Well, I mean, the multimodality, they can generate video. I mean, we cannot generate video, right? I mean, we have very limited output modalities. About audio, we can generate text, we can sort of generate. But in this sense, the models are already better. You can instantly replicate them. They're faster. They have more memory. You train one system and then you copy it a million times. And they're improving exponentially, and the humans are sort of have stagnated. Really, I mean, culturally we improve, but for each individual human, there's no progress anymore. Okay, so here's sort of the main slide why it works, and the math is here really simple. I mean, in practice, of course, it gets more complicated, and that's the reason why there's a whole book. One of the reasons. So if you have you have a company C, and the worker E, and the worker works, right, and gets a salary S, right, and then the worker gets replaced. So the company saves the salary. So the government could just say, okay, the saved salary we tax away, right? So it's like automation tax, and we give it to the employee. So the company is not worse off because the savings of the salary is now taxed away, so it's the same as before. And the employee is not worse off because it just gets unemployment money, or whatever you want to call it. Instead, of course, this is this is idealized and in a transition period, and there are of course complications. I mean, the robots, they cost money, right? You have to take it into account; they're not free, right? But you can all put that into the models. So it's not really rocket science. Okay, and so that's. I mean, if you want to see the details, you have to look in the book. If you and now look at the production costs, right? So I'm not actually talking about enormous growth of the economy. There are some people, including me, who believe economy can grow 10-20% per year, even higher. And then the economics becomes the financing becomes even easier. But most economists don't believe that. So if I talk about if I assume 10% growth and everything is fine, then they will say 10% growth is just ridiculous. Your model is wrong, right? So I'm not assuming any growth here. In practice, of course, the substitution will be more efficient, right? And not just one-to-one substitution. So in practice, it will be much better than just taxing the automation away. That comes here. I mean, it's all really simple, right? So I mean, in theory, in practice, again, getting it politically done is complicated. So if labor is automated, what is left over is the material costs, right, and the energy. And the energy, comes from solar cells or nuclear, which is also machines which can be built. That also tends to zero. And then we have self-replicating factories, right? So they're also built for free. And the only scarce resource is rare earth, minerals, and prime land. Otherwise, everything goes to zero. So we can have extreme abundance, for free. And I estimated that if you just fill 5% of the Sahara with current technology solar cells, you get all the energy which is sufficient to run data centers which do the cognitive work of equivalent of 7 billion humans. So you can sort of double the cognitive capacity. So everyone can have a household robot of IQ 100 by just clustering 5% of the Sahara. Of course, you have to transport the energy, but there are other deserts and there are other ways, right? But and by the way, also, this discussion about that AI takes a lot of energy is also totally misguided. It's already now the case that inference cost per task, if you compare it to how much energy a human needs for solving a certain task, is already lower for AI. And then, okay, what about training? Well, training, okay, costs a lot of, $1 billion or whatever, right? And 3 or 4 months. But then it's used by billions of users, or at least hundreds of millions of users. And a human, right? You have to train every human individually for 25 years at least. And if you do the math, even training is cheaper than humans, raising humans. So the only argument you can make is that we are creating new entities, right, which consume new energy. right? But you cannot make the argument that they're less efficient than humans. It's just plain wrong. So here's sort of the economics model, right? You have the abundant materials. Then you take solar and nuclear to mine, the mines, and then we refine it. And then you produce the products, which includes the factories, which includes the equipment, and it includes, of course, the solar and the nuclear. So that's a closed loop here. So everything can be produced without humans in the loop, and everything is essentially free, right? Iron is unlimited, silicon is unlimited, and there are some rare earths where you have to artificially put a price on top of it, otherwise it will be exploited, and then you don't have anything for the future generations. So I estimate that you can build a whole house for $100. Yeah. So if the land is free. Yeah. So okay, and if you would disenfranchise the landholders, right, which is not easy, then everyone could have a freestanding house in the UK, and in Australia you could even have sort of a 1 acre or so of land and have your farm there. So even land is enough, right, for everyone. It depends a little bit on the country, right? Okay. Then there's, of course, luxury goods and status goods, right? If everyone can have a Ferrari, then it is not fun anymore to have a Ferrari. So there will be goods with arbitrary price tax in a Chanel bag or so, yeah, which is production cost is zero. It's already close to zero, yeah, and then you pay, a really high price. That will stay. I'm just saying the cost will go to zero, not the prices will go to zero. Okay. Okay, so here's just some progress of, compute becomes cheaper, solar becomes cheaper, but solar doesn't have to become cheaper. It can just stay like that. And even, if you have no progress in hardware anymore, with a little bit more software improving, apart from the robots, right? There will be some more improvements. Okay. Pretty good. So, the cost of automated goods, half every 2 years. That's just symbolic. Essentially for, say, AI goods, not for real goods. But it could, if everything is automated, right? You still need to produce the factories, right? And increase the number of robots which produces the factories, and there's a physical limit how fast you can do. And maybe, halving every 2 years is also realistic in a fully automated society. Maybe it's a little bit slower, maybe it can be also faster, I don't know. In the non-automated goods, of course, the price will not significantly decrease because, there's a subsistent wage of humans. Below that, they cannot work anymore because they starve, right? So, there's not, you cannot get the salary down to zero of humans. There's a lower limit. Okay. So now a little bit internet. Oh, there's sections. Okay. Okay. So how does it play out internationally? So if you have one country, say a leader, AI leader like United States, and then I deliberately didn't pick a developing country, then there's even more problems. But they say Australia, at least we have a lot of resources. Coal and so on, and maybe that's still demanded for some while. Then there will be high margin AI and robot products which Australia has to buy, and either you keep up with the raw materials, right, or you're into trouble, right? And let me keep it short. It's difficult to get it internationally right, but there are various options. There are various taxes you can imply. So European Union, not uniformly on countries, but many countries introduced during COVID a digital service tax of between 2.5% and 10% or so. It depends on the country. Which is of course essentially taxing the American companies for importing AI and other IT services, and then you get some revenue out of it. Yeah. So, but that's just one way. The exchange ranges. If you have a trade imbalance and you don't increase your debt unlimited, then the exchange rate adapt so that just the inputs become too expensive, and then Australia has to deal with it, right? Build their own AI. So there's various ways of this problem to even fix itself in a certain sense. So here, that's a graph about the AI preparedness index. So how prepared are various countries for the AI revolution? And surely US is up here. I'm a little bit surprised by Europe up here. And then we should single out China, right? China is also pretty prepared. And then it goes down, right? Africa is pretty unprepared. Okay, so that was the really very brief overview over economics, which will be complicated. I mean, in the end, you don't want to tax automation because that stuff is innovation, right? But as a transition period or a partial way of doing that, and I come to the taxes more later. Okay, that's repeating before, right? Yeah, so here's the quote: "New jobs will always be created." I mean, this is really a mantra which is wrong these days. And the analogy with the horses is now clear, right? When the tractor came, there was no new jobs for the horses. And there's a graph right here. It comes a little bit further down where you nicely see how the horse population, went down like hell. They just got retired here. And I mean, it's not that bad to be in retirement, right? As long as have a decent income. And I mean, Europe is sometimes feels like it's sort of in a retirement phase already halfway. Yeah, so there are alternatives, of course, right? And the alternative is to create more and more bullshit jobs. And I mean, we already have quite a number of bullshit jobs. Yeah, okay. The details of these bullshit jobs come in a second. Okay. Yes. So that's about that automation just moves the threshold up. I mean, the water level is rising. More and more jobs can be done by machines, and the new jobs, right? If they are below the water level, are instantly also done by the machines. Maybe there's some delay because we don't have enough AI capacity. Sometimes we have to even program ourselves because we run out of quota. But then that will solve itself sooner or later. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Here's the worst picture. So you see it peaked in 1910 or something like this, and then the tractor came, and I mean it felt like. Yeah, I mean, it took 50 years, right? It took some while, but this revolution will not take 50 years, right? So it will be faster. So there are many things which, from the past industrial revolutions, they took 1 or 2 generations, and they also took 1 or 2 generations for people to profit from it. But this one will be much faster. Yeah, this dotted line, for instance. I mean, maybe 2050 is even conservative. But, things are in practice slower than theoreticians and philosophers believe, right? So I give it to 2015, but not much longer before we are done. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, everyone knows the books by Ray Kurzweil. Singularity is near or is nearer. There have been old books by Hans Moravec. He was a roboticist. His first edition had a really nice title. Mind children. So he regards the robots as our children of our mind. Yeah, very beautiful title. It's also a very nice book. Of course, it's older, but I mean it's the same content. And he already, like many others, remarked, right? This what is hard for humans and what is hard for AI. It's not the same thing. So cleaning plumbing is always mentioned as the thing which really maybe last or second last replaced. I think there are others. Like a surgeon, for instance. I mean, you have the difficulties of dexterity plus an intellectual component. So maybe surgery. So people ask me, what do you recommend, for my child, and they don't want to hear, should become a plumber, right? Yeah. But if you tell them should become a surgeon, right, then oh yeah, okay, yeah, it's acceptable. And I think it's also, you know, an honest answer. But plumbing will also stay a while. Then of course we have, you know, math, chess, and data analysis, which is easy for humans, and then some things are easy for both, and some things are hard for both. Okay. Yeah. So the second quote, that humans are not horses, refers to that sort of we have agency and political power, and the humans did not, right? And yeah, and also, I mean, we have empathy and care about hospitality and so on. So there will be some jobs which will remain, and especially the social jobs. Right? So there are people who, you know, many nurses like their job. You take care of your parents, maybe, you know, and you do that not because you get money, but you're obliged to, you know, maybe you outsource it to a robot partly, but maybe 100% you feel bad. Then, you know, even now we have quite weird jobs. I mean, YouTube influencer. I mean, I'm very liberal with jobs, and, you know, I would even count this as a job. Yeah, but so in the book, there's you know, there's several pages about what actually is a job, right? So, you know, maybe you know, Brenton, you're a nice guy, right? And I want to talk to you, but you're busy now, right? So you will charge me, you know, $100 per hour, but I'm busy too, so I will charge you also $100. So we just chat with each other and charge each other $100. Now suddenly we have a job, right? And so we can keep jobs in this way, right? But that's not, I mean, I think that's not in the spirit of a job, but it's quite tricky sort of to characterize, you know, what's actually a job, especially in the future. I mean, in the past it was clearer, right? If you're on the farm, right, you know, it was hard work, right? Not just chatting and getting money for it, like I'm doing here. Yeah, and, you know, then there will also, you know, status jobs. You know, if everyone has a household robot, you know, doing the cleaning and the cooking for you, you know, then the rich people say, look, you know, you're a good cook. I mean, you don't need a job, but you like cooking, but, you know, you want to do it for me. But if I give you a lot of money, maybe you want to cook for me, right? And then I can hire a human to cook for me. And look, oh, I have a human and you just have a robot. But if everyone has, you know, a UBI, nobody's forced to take any job they don't like to. We just do the jobs we like to. And then, of course, the price level will be hardly, I mean, nobody wants to do, I don't know, you know, maybe okay, yeah, some disgusting job which some human likes, you know, to be done by a human. You have to pay a very high price, right, for this then. Okay, yeah, voluntary, well-paid work will sort of still be there in Utopia. And of course, you know, also unpaid work. I mean, there are artists, you know, there's, you know, open source software developers who do it for fun and not for the money. You know, I would also just continue what I'm doing. Maybe I shouldn't put that in the recording here, even if I ... So, okay. So there's a nice polemic book by Graeber. He was a social scientist, 2018, and the title was Bullshit Jobs. And he categorized these bullshit jobs, you know, into flunkies, goons, duct tapers, box tickers, and taskmasters. And so there were some surveys. He did some. He came up with 20%. And there was a more recent study, so 17%, or, you know, this order of magnitude of these jobs are already socially useless. And this will only grow if people require jobs, right? I mean, then they take, you know, any bullshit job just to survive, right? And I would say, you know, this is a full employment dystopia. Yeah, in the book I extended this category. I have sort of four or five more. So one of my favorites, is marketing, right? I mean, everyone hates seeing ads, right? It's pushed on you, and it consumes a lot of money. No, I have a slide here. Here it is. At least for the marketing, I have a slide. So we have here sort of, it's called a red queen game or race. It's a marketing race. It's actually a negative sum game, right? If company A puts out more marketing, you have to compensate for that. And this is just a total waste of money. And just to put it in perspective, the military budget in that's globally, yes, globally, is 2 trillion. The ads budget is 0.8 trillion. Yeah, so I mean it's insane. It's 1/3 of the military budget. I mean, you may not like this, but at least it has some function, right? To eradicate global poverty, you only need 175 billion. So if you would just, introduce what I call in the book bullshit tax. All these jobs which are bullshit, you just tax heavily. You can do really some good things with this. I mean, I'm always against making things illegal or preventing things hard, but you just tax negative externalities as we do, like with carbon and gasoline for cars and so on, and luxury products. While on the other hand, basic products like bread or so are discounted. A GST or whatever you call it in the country. And so I think there should also be a bullshit tax in order to prevent this dystopian future where everyone, just hustles around for nothing. Okay. Yes, that's another category. What was this here? That was maybe the class because I forgot. There's an incentive for companies to make their hotlines really bad, right? Because if it's bad, right, then people don't call anymore. But that costs a lot of consumer time. That costs Americans 165 billion per year. By just hanging, in a waiting room or talking to a bad bot or whatever. And this is also something which is not self-correcting. I mean, I believe in the free market, but some things you have to be nudged in the right direction. That's what you think. There's hyper competition, and competition is good, but hyper competition is bad, right? If you have, say, in the developing country, you have, you often go to these countries and you have, 50 stands in a row. They sell all the same, mass-produced stuff, right? And have very little sales because there are so many, right? So this is for total waste. So there, a government intervention that there should be only so and so many booths. There should still be sufficient competition, but not so much that you waste your time standing there and don't have any sales anymore. Same with restaurants, for instance. I mean, if you have, too many restaurants in price competition and then the restaurants are empty. So this makes no sense. And then you just have bullshit jobs. Excessive marketing, I already mentioned. Predatory finance, also one of my favorites. I mean, high frequency trading is to a large degree bullshit. Again, very simple solution. Just have a 0.5% or start with 0.1 transaction tax for every transaction. Whatever survives this is potentially useful. I mean, there's all these arguments which are mostly self-serving. But whatever kills, whatever is killed by a 0.5%, is in my estimates, bullshit. Folly project, all the snake oil stuff, gold flakes on food and homeopathy and so on, just tax it. Then credential arms races, this is probably something, it's a credential, right? Where you just have to, you have a degree in order to get a specific job. And this degree became totally useless because you can, learn it much better online or so. The annoyance economy, like before, hanging in a waiting loop. Okay. Yes. Okay. So let's come to more redistribution. I mean, the model at the beginning was very naive. Yes. So once we accept that the products and services are produced, it's just a matter of redistribution. And there are various ways of doing this. There have been many suggestions. I think the most popular competitor is a sovereign welfare fund or citizen welfare fund, where everyone has just shares in companies. But it's fine. I would like to separate the payout people get from how it is funded, right? But if you have a citizen welfare fund, you have to, of course, restrict it because you can't allow citizens then to just blow their stake, take out your money, or invest recklessly. And most people don't have the skill, so it needs to be heavily regulated. Potentially like pension funds, right? And that is one way which I also discuss in the book. That in many countries, or in some at least, in Australia, is particularly good. We have a very excellent pension system where you pay yourself in, it's yours, right? And then there's restricted ways of getting it out. It's tax advantaged, and this already exists, right? And even during COVID, right, in emergency situations, you can take money out before you are 60. So everything is sort of in place already. So what is missing is really that you can take it out whenever you are not employed, and then of course the government or whatever has to put in more money because if you take more out, you have to put in more in. So that would be a route. I'm in favor of UBI because it's really super simple and clean. But then there's realities, and you have to set up, and it's a nice thing if people own the production. But if there have been many cases where these funds have been set up, and then politicians just raided the next government. Oh, there's money, right? Governments are not very good at saving money. They're good at getting into debt, right? And if there's a pile of money which funds, some UBI, then okay, let's just reduce it and use it for military spending or something else. So that is very dangerous to give the government money. More than piping money through it, right? The tax goes in and immediately sort of goes out for whatever expenses, but letting them pile the money is very, very, very risky. Okay, so apart from having increased unemployment, there are of course better options. So Keynes already suggested in 1930. It's nice. It's nearly 100 years now. That in 100 years we hopefully have a 15-hour work week, and it's a little bit optimistic. It's only 4 years away, but maybe we manage. So rather than one worker works full time and the other is unemployed, we just make 50-50, and then the rest is topped up via one of these taxation mechanisms. You could adjust the retirement age rather than ramping it up, making it lower. There's the young people who complain all these old people have these jobs and are sitting on them, right? And preventing us from getting jobs. Just reduce the retirement age. Yes, the UBI can be funded from a lot of different taxes, profit taxes, capital, luxury taxes, land, negative externalities, or share ownership, which I mentioned before. So Sam Altman proposed that maybe, one of the first ones of the AI leading labs to have such a fund. So instead of giving people money, you could also provide better services, right? Better healthcare service, housing and so on. And for the basic stuff which everyone needs, that's maybe a good system. But for other things, you want to allow the people flexibility, and money, is fungible, so it's more flexible this way. And the automation taxes I mentioned at the beginning, they're actually not really good, right? But they're just one way of doing it. Yeah. It's not that I'm suggesting that. Possibly we need this in a transition. So here's just some pros and cons for the different options. I want to leave some time for questions. I'll just leave that. So the list and then the pros and cons. So the income, will go down, of course. The taxes from income will go down if income goes down. So the taxes have to come elsewhere. You can ramp up sort of income tax, right? But if nobody has income anymore, so that's also then ultimately futile. Okay. So here there have been many, unfortunately, mostly small-scale pilot studies for what UBI or similar mechanisms imply. So the Marshall Islands is the first one. There's no date here. I think it was last year or 2 years ago. They have a nationwide UBI now. It's only $200 per quarter, but it's also cheap to live there, but it's still not enough. It's subsistence. Then there are bigger pilots, even $1,000 per month, right, or $1,200 per month, and then they study the effects, right, and overall the effects have been positive, right. People, don't have to, toil their way in minor gig jobs, and then don't have time to find better jobs. They can do re-education. So very few studies show that people, I mean, maybe none, I actually can't remember, show that people get lazy or something. But I mean, in a post-labor society, it doesn't even matter whether people get lazy, right? So one thing is that you have to increase the UBI to the amount of jobs which are available, right? So if there are more job seekers, right, than jobs, you increase the UBI so that people are discouraged to look for a job which doesn't exist. And if there are lots of jobs but people don't want to take the jobs, then you lower the UBI so that you get the balance right. And of course, I mean, you also have to match the skills, right? And the re-education take time. But roughly speaking, like the central bank, adjusting the interest rates, right? You have to sort of adjust the UBI to get the balance right. In the transition period where we still, there are jobs which cannot be automated. Yes, so here are some of the disadvantages of the welfare, of owning shares. You have to prevent people from squandering the money. You have to prevent people from actually, choosing their portfolio. You have to limit it significantly. And in the Australian and some other countries, the pension funds, you can choose a little bit, between safer and less safe. But if you're very rich, you can sort of do whatever you want, as long as it's not, cheating, right, taking out or so. But the normal portfolio has limited options to invest, and that's a solution, of course. And the best thing is an index fund anyway, because the managed funds on average perform worse than an index fund. Okay. And sort of also, you need a each bucket of money, right, to fund it. That's what I mentioned, right? I mean, that's if you open an economics textbook, it's filled with this demand and supply curves, which gets really tiring after a while. The UBI level, and then you have here the number of people looking for jobs. And the job seekers go down if your I level goes up, but the job openings it is more or less flat. That is some slides about the inequality. So we had high inequality up to the 1940s, and then the war equalized it. That would be another option, of course. We have another big war in order to get rid of the inequality. And that's the standard option, right? It would be nice, to not use the standard option, but to use a different alternative. And now since the 1970s and the 80s, right, the inequality grew again. It's the capital, because capital, earns now more than labor. And we had, in various countries, a marginal income tax rate of up to 90%, right? And now we're down to below 50, right? UK is 45 and US is any state you're in. And that's way too low. I mean, the argument is always if you increase it, then the interesting people leave the country and you have to deal with it. And the book is a whole chapter about how to deal with international movements and how to get it right, which is not easy. But something has to be done. I mean, the alternative, maybe, not a war, but a civil war or something like this can also solve this. I'm just pointing out the options, right? So I'm hoping that, of course, government will not do anything, right, before something bad happens. But in the ideal case, maybe we get 20% unemployment rate, and then people, get outraged, and we have some major protests, maybe with some little bit of violence, and then maybe people wake up and something will be done, but nothing really very harmful happened. But that it's, it's just, some politicians read my book, or it's nearly nothing new. It's just, nicely compiled, and then they act. But the good thing is that, virtually all of the I-Lab leaders, are pro this approach, right? Which is compared to, previous, industrial revolutions. I don't know precisely, but I have the feeling that they were much more greedy than at least how they currently publicly appear, at least. Another labor capital. That was the history. The other graph was the future, and that was the history. You see already goes down the labor fraction and to the capital fraction. And yes, so what is the meaning of life if you have no jobs anymore? The Americans, say no. Okay, life is meaningless, without jobs. That is really terrible. So other cultures, have less problems with this. And if you look back, the hunter-gatherers allegedly only worked 4 hours per day, and this was not really work for getting a salary. So the indirect, I mean, hunting can be fun, right? Or collecting berries. So this toil of, I mean, it was 80 hours, and then now we're luckily down to 40 hours. This is not the natural state of humans or humanity. Yeah, the natural state is leisure, right? And just do the minimum to survive. So these people were, I mean, it was cruel times, of course, in history, but otherwise they were probably also happy with not having a job in this sense. Yes. So why I believe that the redistribution could happen in democracies, at least, right? If the people are sufficiently unhappy, then maybe some parties which are supposed to be for the poor people return to their origin, and really present them, and then people will vote for them, and then we will vote in UBI or whatever. So if the democratic process survives, then if the majority of people is unemployed and miserable, then they will demand redistribution. And to a certain degree, the rich people will also agree to it, because they also want to live in a country which is halfway decent and where there are not constantly riots or something like this. So cautiously optimistic. Yes, that is what I mentioned more or less. Yes, I think I covered it too. There's 2 options, good and bad. Meaning of life. So it's, I mean, this room here. I don't know what is funny here, but so I mean, this is a highly biased sample here. If I would ask, do you find your job fulfilling? It gives you meaning. I will probably see a lot of hands, right? But if you ask, randomly among the population, then you get these answers here. So family and friends trumps. These numbers add up to more than 100 because some people have more than one thing they care about. So paid employment is 24%, right? So they get pleasure out of jobs. But for those who have this, either enjoy the job or have this competitive drive, I want to be CEO of a company and so on. So what would Demis do, right? Without the mind, he would probably, become a chess master or something like this. So there's enough. You can just play competitive games, sports or, esports or whatever. So there's enough, competitive stuff out there without job. Health and well-being. People care about hobbies, community volunteering, faith and spiritual things. So, and this can also shift over time. So I think, at least the next generation will have no problems. I mean, it's really hard to raise a child. Stop playing so much, study, right? To yes, continue playing. That's great. So the second, way of raising children is much easier, believe me. Slow. There's these idle hands are the devil's workshop, and I admit so that there will be some people who once they have more free time to do stuff, may do evil stuff. But I think we can deal with it somehow. I should really stop. What is this here? Okay, hourly decline. You have seen this before in different countries, and you see again here the USA. It's really the outlier here. They like to work themselves to death. This is just a summary which I sort of can actually skip. I thought to mention re-education would be also a big block. Also parental leave, maybe on 20 years parental leave, right? From your first child till the last one is sort of out of the house. Why not, right? parents are really stressed out with a job, right, and the children and so on. They could, maybe, at least in transition phase, it would be good to have a part-time job or something. Staying home all day is also, not nice. Okay, so this is transition phase, compulsory employment, voluntary activity, and so on. I mean, there's nothing behind it. Maybe you have an S curve, maybe it goes up exponentially, we have to see. I mentioned all this. Global taxation needs to be done right. Democratic framework needs to stay. Here are some challenges. So these are all topics which are detailed in the book and treated properly. Yeah, let's just, these are some references. I mean, there's 250 references in the book. And what is this? No, that should not forget. End it here. Okay, thanks for your attention.